All right, hello guys. We're going to be covering the water cycle. The water cycle, in the end of this presentation, you should have this. And so I'm getting a document for you that I'm sharing with you, and it's going to have one side that will look like this, that you'll have information shared, and at the bottom of it, you'll have these pieces filled in. And on the back of that document, you'll have this. This is going to be the title and the vocab that going to go with it. The way that I would like for this to be done, and this is just an example, somebody messed up this example, is that it's going to cover that word. So as you study for this, you typically just flip up and you see the answer underneath. And so let's go ahead and start looking at this vocabulary as you generate this on your own. So you're turning in these two documents to me today from taking these guided notes. So for the starters, we're going to be identifying the water cycle. The water cycle is really about the concept of you have water, which is going to be reused again and again. So that water that you're drinking, it has been through many different processes. And we're going to identify evaporation as well as transpiration, condensation, precipitation, runoff, root uptake, as well as seepage. All of these things are part of how the water cycle is going to work. And I need for you to eventually have completely everything put together in this, that you understand the actual water cycle. So let's go ahead and get into the parts of the water cycle. So the first thing I want to identify is transpiration. So transpiration is going to be when water is going to actually leave a plant. And so it's going to leave a plant, and it's going to look kind of like evaporation. And sometimes it's even called evapotranspiration. But the thing about transpiration is it's going to require a living thing that's going to release it, and specifically plant life that we're going to see here. So with transpiration, we have plants returning water back into the atmosphere. This is one of the things that's going to be responsible for getting that water back into the cycle, because we know that we have hundreds to thousands of gallons of water tied up in a normal tree. Next, we're going to have evaporation. So evaporation is going to be the movement of water from liquid to gas, and it's going to do this from a body of water, so between bodies of water. Now, we're going to have, let's say, an ocean, a pond, a lake. This is losing water. So sun is shining down, and it's going to be evaporating off. You also see this, let's say, after a strong storm where we have pooling water on hot asphalt. You have that evaporation that's taking place. This evaporation, along with evapotranspiration or transpiration, is going to allow for that mass amount of water to go from being on the ground to being up into a gaseous state that's going to be held and going to the next phase, which is typically looking at the clouds. So that water vapor is going to condense. When it condenses, it's going to form the clouds. And so that moisture that's in the clouds, you're going to have a few different things weighing onto that. And so one of those is atmospheric pressure. Whether it's a high pressure or lower pressure system, is going to give you a lot of characteristics on the ability for that environment to hold water. So if it can hold water, then it can be a really moist, wet cloud. But the reality is sometimes whenever there is high pressure, that's going to cause everything to kind of push together. When it pushes together, those droplets are going to form, and you're going to have rain that's going to fall. And so it's not just rain, but it's all different types of precipitation, which leads us to our next one. So precipitation is when water is going to fall back to earth. Now, we typically think about rain, and it's not wrong, but it's not just limited to rain. So it includes things like our hail, our sleet, our rain. So hail, sleet, rain, snow, all of these are examples of types of precipitation. So as you're doing this, instead of just writing it on a sheet of paper on your own, make sure that you are completing this as you go through. So you have this as one of the documents. You're going to do your best you can to mimic this. You can attach a photo, or if you have to do it digitally, you can create little text boxes and write out to the side of it. And using Google Sheets may be the best means to do that. All right, so continue on. Precipitation. So we're seeing the precipitation fall down, and then we get to the point of sometimes there's runoff. When that liquid, when that snow, sleet, rain, whenever it's going to hit that surface, it's going to go to the point that it's going to hit and run down. And it's going to run down usually hills, or if you have mountains, this can create quite a tide of water that's going to be moving down into the larger bodies of water. So at the bottom of these valleys or of these mountains, you're typically going to see creeks that are going to become rivers, and these rivers that are going to lead to large ponds, lakes, or even continue on to the ocean. So another thing is seepage. Not all the water that is hitting is going to be running away. Some of it is going to hit and it's going to set there. And that's when we have something that's called seepage. So seepage is going to be when the water is going to be settling into the soil. So water is going to hit and then it's going to seep into the ground. And so this is making it more of a locked-in setting to where it's staying put. In settings like this, you have something called root uptake. Root uptake, just like you would think it would be, is going to be where water is essentially going to be taken in by the plants, like all the grass, the hay, the different things that you see in the fields, as long as a well has these large trees. So this is root uptake. What water is not taken up by the roots that stays in that area after seeping through is going to become the groundwater. Groundwater is going to be this large body of water that's going to be underneath the ground. And you may think like there's no water under the ground. You're wrong. Think of a well, something that was really popular to dig 100 years ago, and beyond that, even hundreds of years ago. You would have settlers or maybe your great-grandparents that have dug large holes in the ground deep down until they get to the point that they've hit water. Having fresh water supply is the difference from being able to survive in that location or having to port water. And porting water from one location to another is just not sustainable, especially in the very cold months. Because if you think about it, the insulation of being deep down in the ground causes that well to not freeze up typically. And so you have water year-round as a result of this groundwater seeping to these regions. So water is going to accumulate and then run back into bodies of water, including the water that's going to be the groundwater. So another thing that is releasing water is the process of respiration. So respiration, you may think of that's you breathing. And you're not wrong. That is respiration. And by chance, we are releasing back into the environment where we release water as well. If you ever breathe onto a window where it's a kind of moment, that creates this like moisture that's on your hand or on your whatever it is that you're fogging up. But that's moisture, and that is coming from your body, from the byproducts of something called cellular respiration as you are going through respiration. So we have respiration that's going to be going on in animals. They're definitely going to be going through respiration. Decomposers are going through respiration. Plants also. I know they're going through photosynthesis, but they're also going through a process called respiration. So all of these things are going to add to the water and release it back into the environment to make it continue as continuous parts of the water cycle. And so let's go ahead and start to fill out the front of this diagram. So the front of this diagram, we're going to label, let me give you the points on the bottom. So that's transpiration, A. We have evaporation, B. Condensation, C. Precipitation, D. Runoff, E. Seepage, F. Root uptake, G. H is groundwater, and I is respiration. Okay, now we're going to label that the top of this. So let's go ahead and identify these different parts on the diagram. I'm going to turn off the lights. That'll make me just a silhouette, but it'll be better for you to see. Okay, so some of the things that we're going to be able to see here, and that is, let's go ahead and start with this here. So this is leaving the water. So when we have water leaving the water and moving up in this pattern, this is evaporation. So we have the letter B represented here because we have evaporation as water is leaving this and moving upward. Another thing that we have is on this side, we have transpiration. So the transpiration is happening at this tree. And this is when water is leaving the tree and going back into the atmosphere. It does not show the little friendly water droplets like it does here going back up. But here we have transpiration taking place. So this is labeled A. So we've labeled A, we've labeled B. Next, we're going to move over here where we're going to have this part that's evaporated move into the clouds. And this is where we have condensation taking place. So we have condensation taking place, putting this as C. So C is happening right here in this white cloud. Next, we move over to D, where we have precipitation. And in this diagram, we have three different clouds releasing precipitation and two forms of precipitation that we see here. We have one that's going to be in the form of water droplets falling, and that's going to be in this really oblong, tall cloud. And we can see those water droplets falling. We can also see water droplets falling from this smaller cloud. And here we have snow, which is also a different form of precipitation. So we have precipitation forming, and I put on my paper D, D, D. So three different clouds that are releasing precipitation, and we have D on there three different times. Next, we're going to get to runoff. And runoff is going to be labeled as E. And so at this point, we have water hitting, and we have a few things that's going to be going on in this region. So runoff is where we're going to have water hitting. And so this spot right here, where we have water hitting the side of the mountain, that's a good chance of runoff going to happen, because we can't get to the point of having seepage and getting into the groundwater if we're on such a steep slope. So we're going to have E right here, where water is going to be hitting and sliding down fast. All right, moving on. Now we have water hitting and staying on a flat surface, and this is going to be letter F. So letter F is seepage, because the water is going to hit and it's going to seep down into the actual ground that's there. If you look below this, you're going to see this arm-like octopus-looking arm that's coming off here, and this is going to be root uptake, as water is going to be taken in from this region as it's being pulled towards that tree, and it's going to be taken up through the tree, eventually out through transpiration. But right here, we have root uptake taking place. So I labeled that with G. All right, I've identified the area here with these water drops, just showing groundwater. And then I go over to these fish, and I put the letter I, because the fish are going through respiration, which is releasing water. We also have some water that's being released by the tree as well. A few different methods that it's releasing water, both through transpiration as well as it's just releasing this due to the way a tree works. So this is my overview of the water cycle. Let's just make sure that we get it. The purpose of the water cycle is going to be to take water, and it's going to be recycling the water. And these are the several different methods and procedures that are involved. We have evaporation and transpiration taking place. We have that evaporation going up to the clouds, where we'll have condensation forming the actual clouds. But then after a certain point, it will precipitate out of the clouds, where we'll have runoff, where we'll have potential seepage getting in, forming groundwater, allowing for root uptake to take place. We can see respiration occurring with the fish, as well as we see water being released by the tree as well. So this is an overview of the water cycle, and you should come up with something like this. I know you can't see it real well, but you see this labeled, as well as the backside, which will look something like this. All right, guys, so that takes us out for today. Have a good one, and we'll talk soon.